The answer is yes, you do have to sign the ticket, or they're obliged to arrest you because they're required to. The whole point of signing the ticket is to skip being arrested, taken downtown, brought before a judge for arraignment, and deciding whether or not you should be released on your own recognizance, to show up for an actual hearing, a trial, or whether or not they can't trust you to come back in as promised. Every time a person makes bail or is released on their own recognizance, it's because the judge who's evaluating you really quickly has come to the conclusion that they can reasonably assume you'll show up in court because you're actively interested in defending yourself in court, and or you've pled guilty and they just need to file some paperwork. You can be arrested, plead guilty for certain things, and they can still release you because it's not something to jail you over. Obviously, if you have a busted tail light, this just simply indicates that you have a vehicle that's got something wrong with it. It may not even be your fault. This isn't something that's considered a good idea to just arrest somebody over. So instead, it was decided a long time ago, mostly because it takes up less time and energy, that they would just tell you the maximum fine for this is this. That doesn't mean you're going to have to pay it. You have to show up in court and discuss it with the judge, and maybe you can talk it down. And if I'm the police officer, then I say, and I'm supposed to be there, but if I don't show up, maybe you'll win. It depends on what's going on that day. You might get lucky. But this is so that we don't have to place you under arrest, because if you don't sign it and agree under penalty of perjury that you'll show up in court, because you have to show up in court for a traffic violation, because it's almost always a safety violation. My safety, your safety, the person up the street's safety. When you drive back and forth to work, you pass an innumerable number of people that you could injure by just deciding to just steer or brake check them or accelerate wildly and do a big flat spin like on Fast and the Furious. Every one of us has an enormous amount of power running a half ton or a quarter ton of metal down the road at 50 to 60 miles an hour and being able to just ram a bus load of kids. Obviously, in a civilized society, you'd want people to understand that if they do something that's merely an accident and might hurt somebody, like not being able to signal, not because you're a BMW owner, but because the fuse broke, and you do a lane change because you weren't paying attention and didn't warn anybody just before you did a lane change, you caused a wreck. People are spinning out behind you, getting hurt, maybe dying. That signal, which even if you're not required to do a signal for a lane change on the highway at the time, you really should. Hint, hint. Yeah, it's a good idea not to be a safety problem. Because these are safety issues. Because it's normally not something a person's doing intentionally. They feel comfortable releasing you because there's a good presumption that you'll come back. If you have a driver's license with numbers, if you have a license plate with numbers and letters, if you have a VIN number, that information tracks back to you. That makes you held responsible for your actions. That's why there's a license plate. That's also why it has to have tags on it. It means it's been reasonably assumed to have been updated recently to make sure that the information is accurate so that they don't look up your license plate after you accidentally hit and run somebody and then go find the guy who owned it 6 years before. It doesn't necessarily prevent that from happening, but it makes it less likely. And all of us, yes, me, you, everybody, wants to hold the person responsible for sideswiping my ass. We don't want it to be a road warrior out there. Because people like me would make it very nasty for people who want to get away with shit. Because their vehicles would be in several pieces. Carefully cut with a laser. I'm joking. I use thermite. So anyway, and no, it doesn't have the ability to cut a car in half. Seriously, that doesn't work either. But anyway, rather than sending everyone to jail or hauling them in for a hearing to plead and then being released on their own recognizance every damn time because doing bail over a parking ticket is stupid, they decided it was okay to release a person if they promised to appear later. Refusing to sign a ticket is prima facie evidence that you're refusing to show up in court when accused. That's no different than showing up for an arraignment. Would you like to be released on bail or on your own recognizance? Yes. And you agree to show up for court? No, I'm going to skip town. Okay, then you're not getting released. That's what its meaning is. That's all it is. It skips a bunch of crap so we can get on with our lives. Because most of the time when you get a ticket, you're trying to go from point A to point B. And if it's serious enough, that you shouldn't be allowed to continue because the vehicle is severely disabled or you're impaired, they place you under arrest. This is for things that they have a very, if the police officer suspects strongly that you're not a threat to the public right now, and that you'll be very, very careful and get that taillight fixed, or just not do something stupid, they're giving you a break. Signing it doesn't mean you're agreeing to anything other than showing up in court where you are allowed to aggressively defend your innocence in this if you want to. But most of the time it's something that's really obvious, like it's a damaged taillight, or you have tint on your car that's illegal in that county or city or state. All you have to do is come in with a note that says, I had all the tint removed, or I had the light fixed, and that's it. Running without plates, without having the little plate substitute thing visible, that's not a safety issue, right? Well, yeah, it is. Nobody can identify you. You can get away with something. You could just be in an accident and not know it. They need to be able to track you down. Accountability is required. Just like people will demand a police officer give up their badge number, even though it's usually printed right on their chest, and give out their business card, which they have to if they have them. You have to do the same thing. Demanding that police have a set of rules that they have to follow that's different than yours doesn't work very well when you demand that they only have the same rights you do. That means if you're demanding that they identify themselves, then they get to demand it of you. Sovereign citizens do not want a world where everything's, fair. Refusing to sign a ticket means you are refusing to appear. You're refusing to be released on your own recognizance, and you're refusing to be released without bail. The whole thing is that one signature gets you out of a bail hearing, gets you out of being arraigned. You don't even have to plead at that point. It just gets rid of a bunch of shit. So you just show up in a courtroom, and if you present evidence like the taillight fuse came loose, I have a note from the mechanics that's what happened, or there was mud on the taillight and whatever, or maybe you have a recording showing him, I fixed it right in front of you. This is mud on the taillight, which actually happened when I was in a car once. Police officer says, tell it to the judge, and I said, I'm a witness to him cleaning it off. He hasn't opened it. As soon as he turns that on and off, I'm a witness. We can get a random person to do it. There's 3 people watching right now. Are you being defiant of me? I'm being as disrespectful as a person should be to a police officer who is ignoring actively a fact. Do you see the tail light? Yes. Do you see the turn signal coming on? Yes. Okay, you just stated there's nothing wrong with the turn signal. It was mud. He still pushed it. The ticket was not required to be paid because there was me and another person, an off-duty cop, who showed up and said, no, there was nothing wrong with the light. It was mud. He didn't clean it off. That's not worth giving a ticket. And the police officer aggressively refused to acknowledge that. His ego, his pride got involved. And this is the umpteenth time he did it. And by the way, that's another cop from another county. The cop could sign it by saying served. And that was abused at one time. Well, you signed it for me. The police officer doesn't have to obey you any more than you have to obey him. The difference is the police officer is required under certain conditions, if you're acting like a person who shouldn't be on the road, of arresting you. Yes, cops push it, and cops are assholes sometimes. Just watched a video where a lady refused to sign a ticket. Well, that's all they arrested her for. The road Nazis. The cops are Nazis. And then she kicked the cop, drove away, almost ran into some people, ran a stoplight, got out and kicked him, got tasered, wouldn't put her arm behind her back. No, you're under arrest. I'll sign it. Too late. The instant you indicate strongly you're not going to show up in court because you say you're not going to pay the fine or show up in court, I'm required to arrest you because you're attempting to evade, justice at that point. Now, you can make a law in your area that makes it where they can't charge a fine for anything. That's fine. Pun intended. So what happens instead of you paying a fine that would hurt enough that you don't let your car go bad? Make sure you do a walk around, make sure the car works every once in a while, make sure the turn signals work, make sure there's a loop light where as long as current's flowing through the bulb at the normal level, the light comes on so you can confirm the light's turn signals are on. That's how they're supposed to work, right? How do we make this to where we don't have to pay fines? They've tried that. Several municipalities have decided not to charge a fine. They just dead ass put you in jail. You don't want fines? $80? How much is your time worth? $80 for a busted taillight. And in that case, the lady had been given tickets before. I want a warning. No, you've had this broken. You just told me it's been broken for 5 months. You could have killed 80 people and not known it by now. You got to get this fixed. It's $80 because you're obviously not going to fix it. But no, I'm going to leave. And then she kicks the guy. Kicking a cop means you go to jail. Because if the cop kicked you, you'd want him to go to jail. Now, that last part we don't do in this society. We don't punish cops evenly. We don't have laws in the books that make it to where we are equal to the police. And if you want to be equal to the police, they have to follow the same rules. And you have to follow the rules too. I agree with this. I'm absolutely in favor of that. But that means you get off your dead ass and you compel your representatives for your city, county, state, and federal government to make it illegal for police officers to be employed as anything that involves a gun or authority over other people or enforcement of law if they ever break any law. First step, you're guilty. You immediately are not a cop. And no, you can't get away with it. And if they do get away with it, because of course they'll get interference, okay, you have a desk job, you can't interact with the public. Why? Because you're not worth the risk. Safety issue, remember? We don't have laws like that. We have policemen's unions and argumentative judges and juries and activists and screaming and not solving anything. But that has nothing to do with any of this. If you're driving a vehicle and you have a disabled vehicle to the point it almost looks like you're a BMW driver because they never use a turn signal, fucking bastards. That means you suck and you shouldn't be driving. So they should just arrest you. Because I don't want you on the road if you can't keep from causing an accident. I have actually caused an accident by walking through an intersection. I didn't jaywalk. I started walking and I stopped because I saw a car. This car on my right saw me stop and started going. This car that I stopped for accelerated and they hit each other. That dead ass happened. And I felt really horrible. And they said, "It's our fault. We know what you were doing." I was being chicken. After that, like most people in Portland, if you're not aware of it, I started walking behind a car between them. Wave at the driver. Get behind the car. Wave at the other car. Hi. Walk between. Get across. If an intersection is that dangerous, and by the way, that was one of the most dangerous ones in the area, and it was a simple looking, very innocent looking street where there was an accident every damn week, what I should have done is avoid that road and just go, 1 block over. But I kept going through there and I kept having to do creative ways not to get hit. The most creative way I found after a while was ride a bicycle. It made it less likely for me to get hit. And then earlier this year, I got hit by a car by obeying every single rule. Not everything we do as an infraction is anybody's fault. That intersection from earlier this year, for instance, was because there was an object in the way. A big farking pole that should be for a highway, because it was technically a highway, that was in a very congested area that was practically a downtown or a burb. And it shouldn't have been there. It was a big freaking tree trunk sized post and nobody could see me, and they had wrecks there every once in a while. They had to change and paint the lines recently to stop that from happening at another intersection because they kept getting accidents and people almost getting killed. I'm just one statistic at that intersection out of hundreds. It's a safety issue. None of us have broken a rule. None of us did anything wrong. We did what we were supposed to, but it was blocked visually. It's like trying to drive through an intersection with a bunch of random pop-up, rubber trees or something. You have to sign the ticket because it's a way to avoid all the other shit that they could do that they're usually required to do. All you're doing is telling them, take me to jail. That's what you're saying by doing it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And I'm sure a bunch of wannabe legal experts will tell me I'm wrong below. And yes, this is me doing an analogy that is not directly the reason for it, but it is the explanation that was given in the court case that caused it to happen in several states. That's why I'm using it. Bye.